all for coming tonight. Your attendance is, I'm sure, a tribute to our panelists who will be introduced momentarily. I'd like to just say a word about the Friends of the Bellevue Avenue Library. We started a few years ago when the library was shuttered as a result of a sharp budget cut in the township budget. And so we formed a group and started out with an idea that possibly the library could be reopened with volunteers. And the library director, David Hinckley, the Board of Trustees, and the Montclair Public Library Foundation used that as a vehicle for reopening the Bellevue Avenue Library. And we are now, thanks to all of their support and the support of the volunteers who staff the library and our wonderful librarians, the Bellevue Avenue Library is now open 5 days a week, Monday through Thursday and Saturday. And the best thing you can do to support the library is to come and use it. This is, it's also a place where if you want to hold an event, let us know, and I'm sure that we might be able to help you make arrangements. So please come and use the library. I'm going to turn this over to Francesca Elms. Before I do that, I want to come here, Francesca.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I would be remiss if I did not spend a moment to thank Francesca for organizing this event. She has been terrific, determined, and absolutely dedicated. Thank you very much, Francesca, and it's all yours.
Okay. Well, I just want to say welcome to our panelists. It's very, very exciting. We wanted to do a literary event, and all these lovely women graciously agreed to come. Julie Maloney from Women Reading Aloud is going to be our moderator, and Louise DeSalvo and Laurie Lico Albanese and Benilde Little have our Montclair memoirists. Just didn't hesitate a second to get on board, and so we're very excited to have you here and very grateful. I also want to thank Watch On Booksellers for coming tonight. They are instrumental to our community in so many ways, but they're also instrumental to this panel, because I sat down with Margot and said, I want to do this. Who should I think about? And Margot always says things like, well, let me think for a minute, and then she just comes up with pearls of wisdom for all of us. So we're very lucky to have such a wonderful independent bookstore, and of course we would all go there instead of Barnes & Noble. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francesca. Good evening and welcome. I want to also thank the Friends of the Bellevue Library. It's wonderful to be here and to have this program, and for bringing us all together. I have a particular love for the library because I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and around the corner from me was a small branch library, and it carried me through elementary school and high school, and it gave me lots of joy and indeed much hope. So it's a particular pleasure for me to do this evening. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our talented panel. On my right, we have Louise DeSalvo, who is the Jenny Hunter Endowed Scholar for Literature and Creative Writing at Hunter College, where she began the MFA Memoir program. She is the author of 6 memoirs, including Vertigo, Crazy in the Kitchen, Writing as a Way of Healing, and the upcoming book titled Slow Writing. Laurie Lico Albanese, on my left, writes in many genres. Her work includes Blue Suburbia, Almost a Memoir, which we'll speak about tonight, Lynelle by the Sea, and The Miracle of Project. Her work has appeared in the New York Times and several other periodicals. Benilde Little is the author of the best-selling novels Good Hair, The Itch, Acting Out, and Who Does She Think She Is? Her memoir is titled Welcome to My Breakdown, which is also the name of her blog, which we'll speak about tonight. She has written for the New York Times, Essence Magazine, and numerous other anthologies, and she teaches creative writing at Brown College. Memoir is a loaded word. It invokes many questions, and the answers come in varied ways. What I'd like to do is I'm going to ask each of our panelists to read a little bit of their memoir so that we can listen to the difference in tone and style, and then we will have questions that I will ask them so we can have a conversation up here, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. So we'll have fun. I'm going to ask Benilde if she would read something from the upcoming memoir that you have.
Sure. Hi, thank you all for coming. It's so nice to be in a small branch. I too grew up in Newark. Osborne Terrace was my branch library. Got my library card at 2. Had no idea where that's from, but that's how ambitious my mother was. This book is a lot about my mother. It's called Welcome to My Breakdown. And I have to say, before I start, that years ago, several years ago, Pam Satrin posted a writer's thing for us. And I was at the bar at Halcyon, and someone asked me about my book, and I told her what it was, and she asked me where I had done my time. She thought that I had actually been institutionalized. And, you know, so I wanted to say that I'm very sensitive to the topic of mental health. It was very serious for me. I like to say I was too busy to institutionalize because I have children. But anyway, so I'll just read a little bit. My mother was gone. I never thought I would survive her death. I was her light, in many ways her creation. When she was pregnant with me, she told everyone she was having a girl. They believed her. This was 1958, and she was in her 30s, and no one had ever heard of amniocentesis. Her friends and her job at St. Michael's Hospital decorated the nurses' lounge in pink. All the baby presents were pink. The onesies, the jumpers, the booties, the hats, the coats. She used to tell me, I told that doctor, if it's a boy, don't even bring him to me. She'd already given birth to 3. She had her girl, took a deep breath, and went to work designing her female child. I would have everything she thought a cherished daughter should have. A canopy bed, piano lessons, and ballet. I'd wear well-made traditional clothes, white shirts with Peter Pan collars and wool plaid jumpers, camel hair coats to my elementary school, which was across the street from my house in Newark. Those clothes would later become a red cape to a bull. Now that I'm grown and she was gone, I'd have to pull myself out of the dank joylessness I'd fallen into. For 2 years before she died, I was in a middle-aged malaise, made worse by the arrival of menopause. When her death came, I fell deeper into a cavern of grief, which impelled me into a clinical depression. I couldn't get out of bed, other than to wake up my daughter from middle school and drive my 2nd grade son, and slug through walking my dog. My entire body hurt, yet I was numb. When my family came home in the evening, I'd moved from my bedroom to a sectional in the basement and watched TV. It didn't matter what, it was simply noise. I had expected to feel grief for the first several months, but then it was 7 months and 8 a year. When this feeling was beyond sadness, was beyond a sadness that I could even recognize. It wouldn't let go. I didn't know what to do. When I'd go to bed at night, this feeling, this nausea of the soul, as David Foster Wallace described it, clung to me along with my pajamas and woke up before me. It greeted me before I opened my eyes, and when I did, I would turn to Cliff, lying on the pillow next to mine, often at 2 in the morning or 4, feeling me move. He would open his eyes. You're going to have to put me somewhere away. I can't keep going on like this, I would tell him every morning and every night. He, having lost his father 2 months before my mom died, was trying to understand his own grief, but pushed it away to help me deal with mine. You just miss her, that's all. It's grief, it'll pass, but it didn't. This couldn't be normal, I told the hospice provider therapist, a grad student sitting in for an actual psychologist who had an emergency and didn't show up on our appointed day. The student was empathetic, but ineffectual, although anybody probably would have been. This had to be something else, I thought, but I didn't say. Although I know that we're all calibrated differently. When Cliff learned his dad had died, he cried. He went to comfort his mom. He planned a beautiful memorial service and went back to work. He was sad for sure. He worshipped his dad. But when I talked about me needing to be institutionalized, he used to joke that I'd be like Diana Ross in Ladies in the Blue Blues with the dark sunglasses on and a white bathrobe and a towel wrapped around my head. He could always make me laugh. During this time, nothing. The Mack truck-sized depression would produce to move.
Thank you. Thank you. And Laurie Lico Albanese will be now.
Wow, I feel like we should take a little breather. So, I think my mother makes a debut in this opening poem. I'm going to read two poems. This was my memoir in verse, 90 chronological free verse poems. I don't think it's been done before or after. Okay, Blue Suburbia aerial view. Follow the highway from Kennedy Airport out to Grumman's old factory. See the used car lots, strip malls, body shops, rusted swing sets, red rooftops, yellow school buses. Come closer. Peer in through our kitchen window on Christmas Eve. Watch my dad putting together a tricycle. Mom frying sausage for turkey stuffing. Listen to my sister snoring, baby whimpering, dad cursing, neighbors shouting with whiskey in their blood. See me putting out a plate of snacks for Santa, waking up to find stacks of presents under the tree. Hear me asking, how does the fat man and his reindeer fit through our window? See my mother, puffy-eyed, dragging on her cigarette, saying, never you mind, you are too damn smart for your own good. This one's about my dad. I have read this one and had people go like, so it is just one small sliver glimpse of my dad, and it's called The 5 Best Ways, it really should be The 5 Best Ways to Kill a Man. The 5 Best Ways to Kill a Man. When the jailhouse comes to town, my dad knows his time is here. Excuse me, let me just put a disclaimer here, which is, the words of my dad's. When the jailhouse comes to town, my dad knows his time is here. He's been saving up for years, waiting on his son. Having none, he drags me to the den after Mom's gone to the mall. He says, this is the way it was in the war. He says gooks, commies, slant eyes, slit throats, wires thinning taut across the centuries' night-blind eyes. My dad's just getting started. He says, I need to know some things about men, especially now that they're building the jailhouse right across from my school. An inmate, any inmate, with half a brain and somebody to bribe, could run across the cauliflower fields, duck under the barbed wire, hide near the bleachers that I pass every day. I'm 9 years old. I listen with my mouth shut. Dad says it only takes 5 pounds of pressure to break the bone on top of the foot. He says if someone comes toward me with intent to harm, I should jam my fingers into his nostrils and pull. Use my thumbs to gouge out his eyes, hit up his nose with the heel of my hand, driving the cartilage right into his brain. Go for the groin if there's no other choice. My dad tells me this because he loves me. He tells me because my time is coming. He tells me because the jailhouse is going up, and who knows what could happen next.
And now we'll hear from Louise DeSalvo.
Thank you. Laurie, I'll remember that about the nose. That's useful. I collect information like that. This is the prologue to Vertigo, my first memoir. It is 1956, and I am 13 years old. I have begun my adolescence with a vengeance. I am not shaping up to be the young woman I am supposed to be. I am not docile. I am not sweet. I am certainly not quiet. As my father tells me dozens of times, I am not agreeable. If he says something is true, I am sure to respond, that is most certainly not true, and that I have the evidence to prove it. I look up at the ceiling and tap my foot, and when my father and I argue, this makes him furious. In the middle of one of our fights, the tears hot on my cheeks. I run out of the house, feeling that I am choking, feeling that if I don't escape, I will pass out. It is nighttime, it is winter, I have no place to go, but I keep on running. There are welcoming lights a few blocks away. It is the local library. I run up the stairs, I run up to the reading room, sink into one of its comforting, engulfing brown leather chairs, pull an encyclopedia down from the shelf, hold it in front of my face so that no one can see me, so that no one will bother me, and pretend to read so that I won't be kicked out. It is warm and it is quiet. My shuddering cries stop, my rage subsides. Soon, though, I become restless, decide to go downstairs to my favorite room, the one where they house fiction. I've already decided that I will stay here until closing time because I know no one will bother me. The librarians have very strict rules, so while I'm here, I think I might as well read something, might as well not waste my time. I pick a book off the new and noteworthy shelf, Sloan Wilson's The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. I read a few pages here and there, so I know it will interest me, know that I'm not wasting my time. It's about a family. It's about the war, two subjects about which I want to know more. I take the book back upstairs. The hours pass. The lights flicker on and off and on, the signal that the library is about to close. I take my book downstairs, cruise the fiction room again, pull down a few other books to read, just in case I run out of books. It's time to go home. If worst comes to worst, I tell myself, I can sneak into the house through the coal chute and hide out in the coal cellar. It's the best hiding place in our house because nobody thinks to look for me there. But there's just space enough behind the coal bin for a smallish girl to hide. Often when my mother and grandmother fight, I read there. It's quiet, and I don't mind the dirt.
I wanted you to hear everyone's intro into their memoir so that we can have a conversation up here about the difference in style and your voice and what drives them to write memoir. The writer John Gardner says, "Genius is as common as old shoes. Everybody has it." I like that. I'd like to ask the writers here, what makes you think that life, perhaps, that sometimes people say that their life is ordinary. Do you think that is true?
Well, the epigram of my book is an effortless life is a meaningless life. And I think that's the piece that we all struggle in some way, and that's what makes us human, and that's what makes reading memoir interesting. What I know, all I know about it is to tell the truth. And when you tell the truth is going to resonate. You know, maybe I grew up where I grew up, and someone grew up in, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That doesn't matter. I think people who say that their lives are boring, I doubt that that's true. But I think that if you're saying that, you're probably working at that being the case. And if you're working at that being the case, then you probably shouldn't write a memoir.
How do you think you can respond to someone who does say, "Oh, my life is ordinary"? How can you perhaps turn them around to think that maybe their everyday life has moments in it that are full of genius, if John Gardner is saying something that we might agree with?
Well, I'm just struck by the three selections that we read. They're all about incredibly ordinary things. I mean, ordinary big things. Ordinary big things, like fighting in the home, or discovering that books are a safe place for you, or recovering from grief. So everyone knows those things. I mean, I've taught a lot of memoir workshops, and there is not a person who doesn't feel that they've overcome something in their life. It's just not possible that you're sitting here at this point in your life and you haven't done something that was hard for you. And that's really, to me, what memoir is about. And when you find the way around that or over that difficulty, I think that would be the genius, right?
Yes. So, Louise, what do you think was the pivotal moment for you that sparked you to write your first memoir?
Let me just add to what everyone said, and then I'll talk about how I got to write my first memoir. I teach in a poor college, in Hunter College in New York City, and I like to tell my students that writing memoir is a radical, revolutionary act. Writing memoir takes the power away from other people who write about us as objects, and it puts the power into our own hands to define ourselves in the way that we want to be defined. And in fact, if there's anything significant about memoir, it's precisely that. Memoir rewrites, undercuts, subverts history. Memoir shows that history is the accumulation of this story and this story and this story. Memoir teaches us that there's nothing special about the special, and that there is everything special about the not special. And that's essentially my message to the students who sit before me, who come to me having been told that their lives aren't worth shit. And my job is to teach them just to look at themselves as if what they do and who they are is extremely valuable. So in the context in which I teach, writing memoir is an extraordinarily important, revolutionary, political act. And if we have enough of them, we can begin to form a true sense of who we are as a people. How I got to write my first memoir, I woke up one morning and realized I'd been writing about Virginia Woolf for years. And I realized one morning when I woke up that she wouldn't even invite me into her house. I was a working class, I was a child of the working classes. She didn't like the likes of me, we know that from her journals. She wouldn't have let me sit down at the same table with her. So what the hell was I doing? Spending hours of every day. I wanted to stop being a ventriloquist, is essentially what I told myself, and I wanted to start speaking in my own voice, only I had no idea what that voice was.
I actually think that maybe Virginia Woolf might have been delighted to have you sit down at her table with you. Benilde, you say about telling the truth, and it sounds like a very simple directive. However, has there ever been a time in the middle of writing this memoir that even though you're saying to yourself, I need to tell the truth, I need to tell the truth, simple words, that in response to that, you said, how dare I say this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is literally, you can still see, the book is sold, the book is scheduled, and I'm still marking, crossing out, re-editing. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to finally turn this thing in, finally on April 9th. I have to say, I don't so much say, oh, I shouldn't say that. Not too much. I mean, I have, but I'm 55, at 45, no way. But at 55, you're kind of like, you know what, it's absolutely what Louise just said. It's like taking the power and saying, this is who I am, and this is, I'm defining this. And it's interesting, I teach at Ramapo, a slightly different population, but also some first generation, second generation college, mostly all white, from suburbs in New Jersey you've never heard of. These small towns, and they all say stuff like, I grew up with the 7-Eleven was where we used to hang out. The biggest thing was we figured out how to put a couch in the parking lot. And but there's life there. Tell me about the conversations you were having on that couch. I want to know about that. And this semester in particular, I had the most amazing class. And I don't even think it was that the class was different, I was different. I showed up. It was my 4th time, I think, my 4th semester, and I had never taught before. I was really nervous. In the first 3, I thought I had to be a professor, and I had to show up a certain way, and I was, using big words. And, I was so exhausted by the time the semester started, I just didn't have a chance to put on, my face, my mask. And I just showed up, and they showed up.
ever been a time, Laurie, that you said, how dare I say this, when you were writing?
Yes, but even more importantly, there are all the relatives who said, how dare you say that?
That's going to be a question later on. Yes.
That's my answer.
No. I figured they did it, I read that. That's what I figured. I figured that, well, part of my story is an abuse narrative. If we keep keeping our mouths shut, this stuff keeps going on, you know, maybe my story will help one kid come out and get the help she or he needs. You know, enough with silence is how I feel. And if you don't like it, write your own memoir. Leave it alone. I don't want to do it.
So I think we can all agree that to be a writer takes courage. To be a writer is a brave endeavor. I think to write a memoir, perhaps there's a double-edged sword here. So let's talk about that for a moment. If you do not tell the truth, the press may slaughter you. If you do tell the truth, your friends and relatives may slaughter you. So why take the risk?
I don't, see, I come at memoir from a completely different place. I don't see memoir as the telling of the truth. You know, give me this truth functional thing. Let's talk 20 minutes after this event is over about what happened. You know, let's talk to 5 people. It's my truth. It's a version of the truth. I think one of the things that memoir does, it shows the contingency of human experience. Memoir isn't truth functional. Autobiography, maybe. I mean, if you're writing an autobiography, maybe you have to go out and check and say to someone, well, did it really happen that way? Memoir is about memory. There's nothing truth functional about memoir. There's nothing truth functional about memory. And one of the, you know, I've written a number of them, and one of the things that really is amazing to me is that the critical establishment doesn't yet know that. You know, the critical establishment doesn't even understand that memoir comes from the word memory, and that this is what memoir is about. Memoir is about how we remember what happened to us, how we make memory, how having memory leads to other memories, how getting those memories back suggests changes in the sense of who we are. So for me, memoir was never about telling the truth, ever, because I can't claim to know what that truth was. As far as I am concerned, the only thing that I have to do, and I think if I tell beginning students that they have to tell the truth, they scare them out the door. If instead I tell them that they have to be authentic, that's another story. And that, you know, they can lie if they want in their memoirs, as long as they tell the reader they're lying. This is the lie I told myself to get myself through the night. This is the way I describe my father, even though he's not half as scary as I make him out to be. So that once you take the onus off of memoirs, budding memoirs, from needing to tell the truth, you open up the fact that memoir is about dream, memory, recollection, imperfect recollection. And that's kind of like, it demystifies the genre somehow. And I think it takes the scariness out, for me anyway.
So, I mean, you can see everyone on the panel does not have to agree, which makes it interesting, because we did hear Benilde say that to tell the truth. So how might you respond to this?
Well, I mean, it's implied, I thought, that I'm talking about my truth.
Your truth.
My truth.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, Laurie?
How might I respond to the idea that there's only subjective truth and not objective truth? I think when you're sitting down to write your memoir, there's no motivation. If you're motivated to make stuff up, that's not what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about making things up. So we're talking about writing an authentic story, and I think one of the things that I think is really important when you're writing your memoir is you're not writing it to get back at anybody for anything they've done to you. You're writing your memoir for yourself. And so when you're writing your memoir for yourself, one of the things you might have to look at are hard truths about yourself. So if you're going to tell the truth about, you know, your dad and your mom and your siblings and, you know, your ex-husband, you should also make sure you're telling the truth about yourself. as you see it. So you're putting, yes, recollecting, you're recollecting the things that happened to you. And if you're not putting the dots in a new order on the page to connect a new narrative for yourself that is a different, more evolved kind of truth, then, you're doing something other than, I think, memoir. You may be journaling. Memoir is really about looking at what happened and getting a little bit of a fresh perspective on it, but don't give yourself the pass. The hardest thing to write about, and I think the reason we're getting these questions, is the truth about what? The truth about the shitty thing you did, the truth about what you did that brought those things on, or how you were a victim and maybe you victimized others along the way. Those are important truths. That's,
There, a few weeks ago, some of you may have seen in the New Yorker magazine, I think it was the February 2nd edition, about Lydia Davis, who is 66 years old. She lives in upstate New York, and she's coming out with a huge book, I think about 800 pages of so much of her writing. And she does talk about putting in some of her memoir work. And she's mostly a short story writer. She says this quote, and I'd like you to talk about this a little bit. "Hurting children is where I draw the line. A husband, you can't hurt a husband." She does put in parentheses, he does have to okay everything. So I think we may have some interesting responses to that. Who wants to go first?
I got a memoir called Adultery. I said to my husband, don't read it. If the family members, the books come into my house in brown boxes. I take them up, I pretend they're, other big heavy things. Nobody has to know. If Christina Baker Klein in the book is the #1 bestseller list in the Times, then we have one kind of issue. I don't have that issue, thank you. So I can get away with having anything I want. I don't believe, that's called censorship. When, I have some students who believe that they have to track their memoirs over there to their mommies and to their daddies and get their permission for writing the truth, if you will. I think that's patently absurd. I would never subject my memoir to censure by any family member. And if they are harmed by what I say, it's only because I've chosen to read it. I've written about my children. One of my sons is here. The problem is this: if we who are mothers or fathers don't write about the difficulties of being a parent, what kind of sop are we telling the next generation of mothers and fathers about what it's like to be a parent? People get hurt in this business, and that's the way it is. You sit down at the dinner table and you talk about it. I'm a colleague of Catherine Harrison's, and she's very, she talks about the moment at which she has to sit her children down and tell her children about the kiss. The book that she wrote, which is about her incestuous affair with her father. What she's supposed to do, not write such difficult material because her kids may one day pick it off the shelf. It's another way of keeping stories hidden. So, my feeling is be judicious, but I wouldn't ever say with his permission.
She did put that in parentheses, but it is a quote.
My husband reads it, but he certainly can't. He's not going to say, he may want to censor. I don't know what he does. He thinks everything I write is great. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. He just wants me to write, because he knows that if I write, his life is happy. When I was in this place and sort of coming out of it and not writing, and my writer friends are here, and they know, they were like, oh my God, stop it already, bam, I thought I was going to stab them down. And you just stop and you just start writing again. And Cliff said to me once, he said, go upstairs and just type, I hate my husband, I hate my husband, I hate my husband. And that's in the book. He totally is, and my mother was the same way. Somebody asked her, because my novel, my first novel, it's maybe out in the back of the hair, a lot of the childhood is taken from my childhood. And I remember someone asking my mother more than once, actually, and she'd always come my book signings and stuff, and how do you feel about, and she goes, I don't care, I just want her to get a check. and like Louise is saying, I mean, it's, you know, I'm a little concerned about this one, because it is just, there's some things, but and I don't talk about my children, I have to say, in any very specific, I mean, I certainly don't say like, being a parent is like the greatest thing in the world or the easiest thing, but like their individual struggles, I don't think it's for me to, to kind of put that out in the world. But they've grown up with me, so I'm sure they're going to probably do that.
I'm sure there are some people in the audience who are thinking about memoir. And a very basic question. I teach writing workshops at the Carol G. Simon Cancer Center at Memorial Morristown Hospital. I've been doing it for many years. And it's very interesting because some of them, it is their last chance. It's their last chance to say what they never had the opportunity to ever say before. And the writing that comes out, the other day I was saying to them, I turned the lights down and I said, you know what, this should be on Broadway. Because what they wrote in 3 hours was absolutely astonishing. Because they do know that some of them may not be there the next week to say it. And because I see them, they die. And so at that point, then, whatever their truth is, it comes on the page. And the writing is so stunning. And the laughter is fantastic. And the wonderful foul language that comes out of their mouths is extraordinary. Because they are finally saying what they have held in all their lives. So I'm going to ask you, to those people who are thinking about writing memoir, how do you decide, telling the audience for some, how do you decide what do you leave in, what do you take out?
You mean in this question of censoring yourself and hurting people, or do you mean?
Yeah, let's take it from that viewpoint first, sure.
Okay, so you should write everything. I mean, you should totally write everything. You should write, I'm thinking of, someone who was in one of my workshops has done some really brave writing. I mean, everyone in all of my workshops have done brave writing. You have to do the brave writing. But that doesn't mean you have to leave it in your book. And it sort of touches on that question. And I absolutely agree, nobody can censor me. I actually stole Benilde's I Hate My Husband and wrote an essay that More Magazine bought. And I had to say to my daughter, so listen, I wrote this piece about hating dad. And she's like, what? So I basically called my daughter and my mother-in-law in the room at once, and I read it to them. And it was actually funny. It's how hating him 10 minutes a day makes it easier to love him, because he's the rest of the day. So I think you should write everything, and then you should leave in what makes for a good story and take out what doesn't. I will say that there were a few things that I wrote, because my memoir goes from my childhood through to my motherhood, right? And I did write something about my daughter's puberty and changes in her body, that when I showed it to one of my friends, she said, I don't think you can put that in the book. And, I then felt compelled. My daughter was 14, I think, right? I said, okay, so here are some poems that I wrote about you. How do you feel about these? Here's this one, here's this one, here's this one. And she was like, you cannot. It was the same one my friend had said. And I was like, that's fine. I'm not going to write about your pubic hair. That's fine. And I've never, ever been sorry that I didn't put that in. I'm going to tell you that.
I hate technology, generally speaking. No, I think memoirs have to, it's the genre in which I always revise the most. I've written in every genre pretty much, and memoirs is a genre in which I revise the most, and maybe every memoir gets 11, 12, 13, 14 revisions. And the reason that is, in terms of what goes in, what comes out, is that I don't even see the goodness in anybody until about the fifth, sixth edition. So I can just let them be the monsters I want them to for a really long time. And I think that that's very helpful to beginning memoirists. That you don't have to, know that there really is another side until very late in the game. So you can let yourself really be horrible to everybody for a long time. And from teaching memoir, I also know that I have never seen a student be able to put themselves on the page with any convincing reality till maybe, the sixth revision. Sit down, try it. It's really fun. Try to write a paragraph about who you are. And, you'll go and find a beer or something. I mean, you just, where am I? Oh, I don't know who the hell I am. I'm 72 years old. Let's see. So getting yourself into the page takes a long time. So what to put in and what to put out, what to take out, I mean, that's an ongoing process. And then one of the brilliant things that happens that's really absolutely wonderful, and I don't know how it happens, is that maybe it's that you're so sick of the damn thing that you just start working very intuitively, very quickly. And that always happens to me at the very, very end after I've agonized. And then all of a sudden everything you just feel that this belongs in and this belongs out. I do want to say one word about courage. I don't like the word courage because it suggests that writers have to do this thing and gather courage and then sit down to write a book. I mean, my family knows. Am I the least courageous person you know?
In the top 5.
I am not courageous. To suggest that I have to be courageous to write a memoir, maybe you have to be courageous in order to fly a jet upside down into the sky. I mean, it's paper, not even ink anymore. It's stuff that you can delete. That doesn't take courage. All it takes is time, sitting down and giving yourself time. So I don't like to tell my students that they need to be courageous because half of them will leave the room because they'll feel as if they have no courage. And that's good because humility is far better than courage, I think, in a memoir.
Let's talk for a moment about the inner critic. That gave a little bit of that has to do with a sighing, a response sometimes. What kind of mental jockeying do you feel like you have to do to give yourself, to get to that point of giving yourself permission? Or is there none?
I think writers that's where we live. We live in that. It's always, I go to A&P and it's like, nothing's ever a simple, like, okay, you have avocados. You use them, should I get the ones that are kind of soft? Should I get two? I get 5. The fifth one's going to go bad.
Well, you said that in your Crazy in the Kitchen, when you and your husband are going shopping, that I think you have the same type of shopping experience.
My husband does all the shopping while I am thinking of the perfect job of applesauce. And my kids say that I'm going to be a little foul, that I am a marketer's wet dream because I'm the woman, if they put a little tie, a bow on it, I'm going to buy it. So no, I have the same thing. I can't figure out it. I can't decide anything.
Yeah. So, right, the gymnastics. So do you think that's part of being a writer? Don't you? I don't know. Is it just me?
No. Yeah, putting the semicolon in and taking it out. Virginia Woolf knew when she was finished with the book. She said, it's a wonderful quote, I have spent all morning taking out the semicolons and all afternoon putting them back in. That's what she knew that she was ready to process. But we didn't answer.
What was the question? But actually, I have to say that John gave her permission.
I'm not sure what you mean by permission. Can you talk to me about that? What do you mean by permission? Because basically, everybody's writing a journal, everybody's writing a blog. What permission? You mean to publish or to put your pen on the page?
Oh, that's two separate things.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely two separate things. Putting your pen on the page is something different. We're talking about all of these books that you have that have been published. And we have many writers in the audience who are thinking about publishing. And so it's guiding them into that arena. Then it's about the permission.
First, write it. Write it. First, write it. Write anything you want. Write every single. Listen, I mean, I was really struck by what Louise said, and she hates everybody in the first 5 drafts. That's a great reason to write. It's a great reason to write 6 drafts because maybe you can't get out of your own way until you've gotten it all on the page. Write everything. Vomit all over the page. There's no. To me, that's the easiest thing in the world. To sit home in your bed, in your pajamas, and write. Then figure it out. When you've got it, then you give the structure to it, I think. And then, then you have to weigh some options, like who's going to be insulted, who's going to be pissed off, who might never talk to me. And that's so far on the other side of starting your process. Honestly, and the people who stop speaking, I can tell you from experience, they were easy answers.
We should have it on the microphone. Anna Wright, some of you know, has won the Booker Prize Award, a wonderful Irish writer. And she came out with a fantastic list of 10 things to do as a writer. And she does say that if you sit down for 15 or 20 years and you write every single day, excluding weekends, that something changes. Not your temperament necessarily, but she says you become more free. So after you write the memoir, since we're talking about the memoir this evening, do you definitely feel that you become more free, or do you feel that in a way you have caged yourself in?
Oh,
Free.
definitely free.
Not me.
That's where you're on that side of things. I didn't say same, I said free.
And we don't have to agree with this, because actually I asked this question the other day to Jen Ann Phillips in an interview, and she did not agree with the word free. She used the word, she felt that she went deeper. And I like that word, deeper. So let's go to, I think we all want to jump in here, so.
Just make fun of Louise a little
Please.
bit. Something that's true. I mean, if you're taking your books and putting them in the attic and
Not showing your family?
I'm trying to think of your lovely husband's name.
Ernie.
Ernie doesn't get to see them, well, then, yeah, maybe you are feeling hamstrung. I don't know.
I don't feel hamstrung. I don't feel free either, because you figure something out, and then something happens. And then you got to start all over again.
Yeah.
And so I'm much more the whole Zen circular things go around and around and around than the whole American upward, onward to progress forever. I'm not that person. Because every single memoir I wrote, I learned, I was in a different place when I finished it, and then I closed the manuscript down, and then the next day happened. And I was in not precisely the same place I was when I began, but I was in the middle of real human ongoing life. And I've changed, but I don't know that I've changed so much from writing as from, I don't know, aging, I don't know.
So I have this great book on my bookshelf. It's called Writing as a Way of Healing.
That's for everybody else.
Yes, and I love that book. And for those who don't know, Louise wrote it. And it doesn't say you're freer, but
you get to a different place. You know what? Audre Lorde said something that I think really helped me think about it. She said, it isn't that the pain goes away, it's that you hold it in a different place and you hold it differently. And I guess that's what I mean. That, maybe the fantasy that by writing about what happened to you miraculously will evaporate and go away. No, you still have the pain. Because to imagine that you won't is to imagine something that's impossible for the human condition. I like to think about the bloody human condition instead of some kind of perfection towards which we're striving.
Yeah.
So you kind of hold the material in a different place. But it can come back and bite you again if something shifts in your life. Talk to veterans of foreign wars who've written, and I've taught them about their wartime experiences. and they move into a different place, and then, they watch a video about a war happening, and suddenly they're thrown back. So I wish it were simple, as, writing as a way of healing makes it seem sometimes.
Yeah.
So would you still say free?
You see, I'm sitting here nodding because I'm gonna choke you because I'm like, you're just bursting my bubble. I'm feeling, because this is my first memoir. Right. I had my free and I got it back. Yeah, it's kind of like, Leon and I were talking about this, about holding, being afraid and, to, expose oneself and then doing it anyway. And that's how I feel, that's how I felt when I, decided to do this. That even though I'm afraid, I did it anyway. And which is what I teach my students, do it anyway. I teach my kids that. But I also agree, that's why I said the thing about, we change. By the time this book comes out, I'm going to be a different person. So I'm going to be on Leonard Lopez, hopefully. And, he's going to be asking these questions. No, but I don't think that anymore. And he's going to be like looking at his producer going like, what's your book? And he does that. And you don't do what we do. I got
engaged, he's looking at the song.
But, yeah, so free, I guess, is maybe not the right word. I don't know, but unburdened, I don't know. I just know that I needed to get this out for me. I know that there are, masks and various, ways that I've worn my hair over the years. And I mean that metaphorically. Where, there are, and from the time I was born, from the time I was presented as this princess of the ghetto, there have been all these sort of, misperceptions about who I am, even in my own household. So it's been a lot of like my own stripping away, and it's as much for me as it is for the reader.
So then, let me ask this. Then how do you protect yourself?
Oh, man.
I was struck by what Benilde just said about that was a stripping away, because for me, I didn't feel that the memoir was a stripping away. I felt it was almost the exact opposite. It was the way of building myself up. My own identity that wasn't the identity that of, the oppressed person I am. We're all starting to sound like we've had this.
So there were a lot. Free worked for you, Laurie.
Well, I was the one who said, yeah,
Oh, okay. So let's keep the tally here. We have one free, one unburdened, and one.
Who the hell knows?
Okay.
yes, no, maybe.
Did you feel though then, Laurie, afterwards that your voice became obviously then much, much stronger?
If we're talking about my writing voice, I wrote, one memoir, and I've written other things in other formats, novels. I always think the thing I'm writing is better than the thing I just wrote. And sometimes I think the thing I just wrote that I published 10 years ago, sucked. So, and I think everyone kind of has that experience. So for me, I just felt like I had told my story. It was something I really wanted to say. I wrote it so that I was the hero of my own life, and that's kind of a phrase I like to come back to, right? That if you're not the hero of your own life, who is? So for me, that was the story I wrote. That's why it made me feel stronger. Yes.
And because you write in many different genres.
It made me feel like I had a voice as a person. The act of doing the writing gave me a voice as a person.
And you write in different genres, so therefore after you wrote the memoir, and I know you're writing something different now,
right.
Then do you feel that you take this voice because it has brought you to that authentic place, and you've been able to then take the strength of that from writing memoir and moving it into another genre?
Yeah, I don't want to overstate the pinnacle of mental health that I achieved. But yeah, absolutely, you're always building on the next thing. Yeah, you're learning. You're always learning. I mean, yeah. Louise, do you want to counterpoint?
Well, every memoir I've written has been in a kind of different voice, and it's been when you're serial memoirs, kind of like being a serial killer. You take a little chunk of your life, and then I'm now writing about my father again, and finally getting around to finishing a book that I've been writing for about 10 years. One of the things that I do want to say is that every book teaches you that you can finish a book, but it doesn't teach you how to write the next book.
Right.
Because unless you're a person who's going to do, and I wish I could be, the same thing over and over and over again and make $1 bazillion doing it, the next book is as scary, and sometimes even more scary than the book that came before, because you don't have the innocence of the first book.
Yeah.
You know it's going to take a long time, and you know they're going to be pitfalls. But one of the things I do tell my students is to be extremely careful when writing memoir, that we don't use the writing of our work to damage ourselves, because a lot of people write memoir, write about really difficult stuff. And there is such a thing as re-traumatizing ourselves, using writing to harm ourselves. I've witnessed it with some of the people that I've worked with. So I really think that for me, if you're going to write very difficult stuff, that you really need a kind of support group, either in the mental health healing, health and some kind of advisor, just to make sure. The way I do, I just keep the writing like very, very much self-contained and don't stay at the desk longer than a certain amount of time. Because I think what you have to do as a memoirist is write, not relive. And once you start reliving, if you're writing memoir, you can really, really be in trouble. So I don't want to glorify what memoir can do, because I've seen instances in which students have in fact started reliving and have gotten themselves into very difficult situations, and that's a real caveat that I really like to talk about.
Let's switch a moment to the format of a memoir. Sometimes there are memoirs where people have obviously photos, they have recipes, they have collages, and how did you come up, particularly Laurie, the format of your memoir here is very different. How did you come up with the idea of the format? And Benilde, yours, obviously you have yours coming from the blog that you've written?
No, it started.
It has the same title as the blog?
Yeah.
Why did you use the same title?
Because it's a marketing decision, and then it's going to drive readers to get interest.
Oh, okay, all right.
But the blog is really just been sort of daily, and it's not daily, but, just talks about my life. And I try to make it not just me, like I stumble upon some truth. And
there's that word again.
I want to share, and say, but the book came first.
And again, so what about the format? Because for instance, Crazy in the Kitchen has 4 different sections in it. So how do you come up with the format? Because they're very, very different. All 3 of them have very different formats.
Well, I do this maniacal outlining of other people's memoirs to the point where I count the words on the page, because I don't know, with every one of my memoirs falls into a different kind of form. And I write, and I think I know where I am, and then suddenly I deal with form pretty late in the game, which then means 1, 2, 3 more rewrites. When I get to the point where I don't know how the book is going to be structured, I start pulling books off the shelf and quite literally outlining them, figuring out how many words it is. And I've just been doing that maniacally right now with one of Nick Flynn's books, which led me to a very simple way to organize the memoir I'm working on now. So for me, format prep is I'm working with language, and all that all the time, right up to the end. But in terms of the gross organizational...
Yeah. And as far as even going back to what Benilde said, as far as the marketing,
I don't think about marketing. That's for the smart guys. That's not for me. I can't think about marketing. My books aren't like that. My books are, You know, I'm not, my books aren't mass market books. I don't have to worry about reaching 700,000 readers. I can do anything I really want, which is, you know, both crippling and freeing. But I only really figure out what the formative book is going to be at the very, very end.
After all the text is done.
Yeah, but then everything has to be rewritten again. You're laughing at me, because you've lived with it. Right, my son is here.
And what about you, Laurie? Because this is a very particular form.
Yeah, this forum happened because I was working on a novel I did that didn't fly. And my agent at the time said, oh, I think you should write a contemporary woman's novel. And being the person that I am, I was like, ah. And I took my poems that I had been working on, and I just needed something to do, so I taped them around my office wall in chronological order. So it looked a little bit like a scene from The Beautiful Mind. And then Frank came upstairs, my husband, and he said, oh, look, this is your memoir. And I was like, oh, yeah, it is. And to be honest, it was a really good form to have chosen, because part of the problem that I think you can encounter with memoir is sort of belaboring, you know, some of your own experiences. And this is very spare. And then I wrote poems that filled in gaps. And so I pretty much think, like, you know, the 90 stories I might tell about myself, if you really wanted to know me, are the topics I covered in the poems. And so it was actually one of the most, except for the chapter about a section about my mother dying, it was literally the most painless writing I ever did. So the form presented itself, and I followed it.
You know, at this time, let's open this up to the audience. You must have some questions listening to this prompt over here.
Hi. So I'm working on my own memoir. It's the first time. Thanks.
Great.
And one of the things I was wondering is, as I've been writing my memoir, I've been putting my issues down on the paper, which has given them a face, and it's given me something that I can identify. And this concept has made those fear and doubts go away at times, but then there are also times when those feelings come back. Sometimes I'm stronger than they were before, and like right now, no.
Yeah. Tell us your name.
My name is Eric Wagner,
Eric.
and hi, I'm a writer.
A lot of people don't know what we're talking about.
So yeah, I guess my question would be for you, since you wrote the book that my mom gave me when I was in school, Writing's Way of Healing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mom.
I'm a writer too.
What's your name?
Lisa Wagner.
Hi, Lisa.
And I told Lisa to buy the book.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
So what do you do about that?
that's my question,
Okay.
yeah.
This comes from some Zen Buddhist work, and it's very simple, but it's very profound. Doubt is just an idea. It's a thought, and that's all it is. It might have no true functional value. So one of the things that I do, and I've been working a lot with doubt in terms of approaching the work lately. All the books I do as an adjunct to some work that I do with some Zen work. I've been writing down in my daily planner every day, doubt is just a thought. So maybe you could do that too. Doubt is just a thought. And when I write down that doubt is just a thought, and then I think to myself, well, I just look and it says doubt is just a thought. And what has happened is that I've been really, since I've been doing this work with doubt in the Zen. Now I just have to step aside and say that my children say things like an Italian Zen Buddhist, right? But since I've been doing this work with doubt, in terms of the meditation work that I do, I have to say that my work has proceeded much more directly. So maybe doubt is just a thought. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, I love that.
I'm getting it tattooed. You can also look at Annie Lamont's book, where she says, take your doubts, put them in the bag, pretend they're monkeys and choose.
Yeah.
Metaphorically speaking.
And actually, if you go to TED Talks, and if you go and listen to Liz Gilbert, she just gave something wonderful and talked about doubt, and how she was practicing her latest TED Talk in the bathroom mirror at the hotel, and she said all the CEOs and everybody she's talked to, and so many of us are familiar, of course, with the TED Talks, and how everybody is nervous and scared to death, including Liz Gilbert.
Yeah, doubt is just something you go like, okay, it's like feeling anything. You're like, okay, but I'm still going to write.
Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, here.
Over here, Juanita.
Hi, I'm Juanita Curtin, and I'm a writer. And Julie Maloney is one of my teachers and mentors, and I was wondering for the panel, who are some of your teachers and mentors that encourage you to write?
This was one of my teachers. Well, seriously, I was a fiction writer, and before that a journalist, and I took Laurie's memoir writing class, and it was hugely helpful. My teacher, one of my writing teachers, was a woman named Abby Thomas, and she's a sort of a serial memoirist. Her most recent one, Three Dog Life, has been optioned too for a movie, as my friend Pam Savage was younger. But I learned from my friends, my writer friends who were here, and but I think for me, my first teachers were the people I grew up with, people in my neighborhood, people in my house,
I wrote academic prose, which is the worst route to writing a work because I had to unlearn a lot. A guy I was teaching with at Fairleigh Dickinson asked me to start writing for his journal called Media and Methods, which was a pretty avant-garde educational journal back in, I don't even remember now, late 70s, early 80s. And that changed my voice. But I was really helped by women in the feminist movement early on, being invited to write essays for other people's books. And the first memoir piece I ever wrote, I was asked to write by a woman by the name of Sarah Ruddock, who did Working It Out, and then I did Between Women with her, a collection. And it never would have occurred to me to write a memoiristic piece until I was asked. So the first encouragement came from like-minded women and men. And then when I started writing, Vertigo, I really worked all by myself. And I didn't have a writing group or anything like that. And then at one point, I got a writing partner, my writing partner and buddy, Adija Junta, whom I speak to. We have a formal telephone meeting every Monday at 4 o'clock. We are not allowed not to talk. We have to have that meeting. And we have a little format that I report on what I did, she reports on what she did. I tell her what I'm going to do, she tells me what she's going to do. We make plans for the week. We talk about impediments, and then we meet again. And so that's where it is now. And of course, encouragement from the community in this town, people like Pam getting us together and watching books and meeting other writers.
Yes, my name is Susan Cameron, I'm a reader, and I wanted to get a response from all of you about the difference between, well maybe not the difference, but some connection between psychoanalysis and your description of writing, especially drafts, and especially connected to your question about mentors and supports, because you can't, it sounds like you can't be isolated. But then you have these thoughts that you keep re-expressing and re-expressing, and I'm wondering about parallels, if there are any.
I think the parallels are huge. I mean, I think that people who write are interested in the process of how you grow. And I'm personally my choice was going to be a novelist or be a therapist, honestly, or be an alcoholic. Or all three. And I really do think sometimes, especially in the workshop setting, that it has to be, I mean, you heard Louise talk about it, that there's responsibility. I feel like I'm joking all the time, but there is a lot of parallel, and I think whether you're writing fiction or memoir, that you're dealing with the process of human emotion, and there's always the idea of obstacle and healing or obstacle and not healing. And I think it's really important that everyone who's writing a memoir realizes that emotional connection. I think that if you don't, the parallel is for you, and if you're leading a workshop, the parallel is to the people who you're doing the workshop with. That there has to be a sense of opening up yourself up and then closing yourself back up. Mm-hmm. And one more thing I want to say about emotion in the writing process is sometimes, and this is true, a lot of times that I have emotions that feel overwhelming, which is often, I really feel satisfied when I can think, oh, I can give this to this character. And everything sort of changes then, because then I'm not thinking about my own head anymore. I'm thinking about that character and how that character would feel when she was having this emotion. So I think there's a lot of parallels.
I just want to say one thing, when you're talking about community and support, that in 2003 I started Women Reading Aloud, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and I started it in my home with 12 women around my dining room table. And I still say every Wednesday morning, I still have writers sitting around my dining room table, now they're in the kitchen, in the family room, in the sunroom, and we have all kinds of retreats and workshops and so forth. And really what it is, it started exactly to pay attention to the question that you're asking about support. And at the time, this was in 2003, I had an oncologist and I was going through chemotherapy, and I said to him, I have something really important happening. And I said, we need to move this a couple of days. So it really, and he said, okay, what is this that's happening? I said, I'm having this first meeting of Women Reading Aloud, and there are 12 writers coming to my dining room table. So he said, okay. So I do think absolutely support and community wherever it's going.
I'm really sorry, maybe we could do one more question. We have to be out of here in a half hour.
Okay.
We have books from Watchung Booksellers to sell, and we have a dessert reception. So we could go on. We could go on forever, I'm sure.
One question. Hi. My question really is about a number of you have talked about this, and then another question came up about the parallel between psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, and writing. And I came tonight because I'm a psychologist and a writer, and so many of the people I work with have had traumatic loss. And so you, Louise, mentioned about how sometimes writing is, of course, curative, and sometimes it's re-traumatizing. So I came because I'm looking for avenues for some of these women, and I know some of you have done groups with that. But also some thoughts about how to encourage or facilitate, reaching out for some people and keep it closed up for others.
Are you asking which of the people you deal with in a therapeutic alliance?
No, just your experience, because you talked about loss. You talked about grieving and loss.
I use three things. Well, at least three. Family support. Let me just say, meditation and Zen Buddhism, psychoanalysis, and writing. That's my triangle. I believe that if you're going to do, this is my own personal belief, that if you're going to do very deep work with trauma, that you really need to be in a therapeutic alliance. That therapy can give you what writing can't, but that writing can do others. Therapy can't. And quite simply because when you write, you are more autonomous, you get a chance to review it and rewrite it. So it's a singular autonomous endeavor, whereas therapy could go on and stress that. But I mean, I couldn't be writing once again about my father unless I were in psychotherapy, unless I were doing the Zen work on that, unless. So I don't know if this helps. This is an answer for you, but I also believe that I couldn't also I couldn't take any one of those three modalities away. I need all three.
Does anyone want to respond to that?
I do, because I actually had been looking for a while to connect with a therapist, because I have worked with grieving people, and I thought that there could really be a really interesting opportunity to have a workshop that was a creative writing workshop, but that was also, so one day you would write, and the next time, or the second half of the meeting, it would process. Because first you open yourself up and you're writing, and you feel like you're writing, and then the thing that we're talking about here, which is that sometimes you cross over into more emotional grounds that as a workshop leader, but not a psychotherapist, I don't feel comfortable crossing into. But if you had the therapist there to take the next step, it would be really useful. That's something I thought about.
Thank you. I think we should bring this evening to a close before the reception, but please do check back and buy books for your friends. If you have copies of them, buy them for a hostess gift, birthday gift, Christmas gift, holiday gift. It's never too soon to buy a book. So thank you very much for coming this evening.